Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, where I get the chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. I am George Socha, Senior Vice President of Brand Awareness at Reveal. Each Friday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern, I host an episode of eDiscovery Leaders Live, where I get the chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. Past episodes are available on the Reveal website. Go to revealdata.com. Select Resources, then select eDiscovery Leaders Live. My guest this week for our last session of 2021 is Rose Singh. Rose is CEO at Triage Data in Vancouver, British Columbia. She's got 25 years of experience in the legal industry, beginning her career as a legal administrative assistant at the Department of Justice in 1996. She completed her paralegal certificate in 2004. She's worked in numerous areas of law, specializing in family and general civil litigation. Prior to her current role, she worked at, among other things, our other places, JFK Law, which is a firm that represents Indigenous communities throughout Canada. She recently joined Triage just in June of this year as owner and CEO. Rose has been active as a volunteer throughout her career as, for example, president and vice president of the BC Paralegal Association. She's been appointed by the president of the Law Society of British Columbia to be part of the Access to Legal Services Advisory Committee. And she is in a 6-year term appointed by the Chief Justice of the Court of Appeal to the Access of Justice Committee of BC. She is especially passionate about improving client services through the use of legal technology, designing customized workflows and methodologies, as well as continuing to strongly advocate for the advancement of all legal professionals and delivering access to justice for all users in the legal system, including legal aid clients, self-represented litigants, and Indigenous communities, which really takes us to what we're going to be spending a chunk of our time talking about today, access to justice. But before that, welcome, Rose.
Thanks, George. It's nice to be here.
Well, glad to have you.
I know. It's nice to be able to chat with the, eDiscovery guru himself. So this is great.
And good to have a chance to talk with some of our cousins in Canada. Last week it was Brazil. This week it's Canada.
Oh,
We're closing out the year on an international tone.
That's great. It's nice and dark here in Vancouver. Hopefully it'll clear up soon and not rain today.
No, rain in Vancouver, who knew?
Yeah, exactly. It's an everyday occurrence this time of year.
Well, I would like to start with your history in the legal industry and why it is that you decided to get into the legal field in the first place.
Oh, gosh. I feel like we don't have time for that today. So it just, it feels like a lifetime ago now, George. I started out, like you said, as a legal assistant. And, in terms of why I got into the legal industry, I think I would say, when I was growing up, we were immigrants to Canada here, and every aspect of our lives, every little thing that we did, including being sponsored, to come to Canada, always involved an aspect of, being involved in the legal system. And so as immigrants, it was, expensive. I remember my mom telling us how expensive it was just to, have a one meeting with an immigration lawyer. And, I think over the years, it was not just one thing, it was everything. Like, once we saved enough money to buy a house, then we needed to have a lawyer to get involved with the real estate side of things. And then my grandmother had a business, and so she needed to hire a lawyer to help her navigate her way through the business. And so, as an immigrant family, my parents worked two jobs, and hiring a lawyer was a hardship for them, and hiring anyone, for any kind of legal advice. So it just meant that we went without for something so that they could get that sorted out, right? So I just thought as I was growing up, it would be great to know somebody in the legal industry. And I think I just thought, why not me? So that's how I got into it.
And when you got into it, what was your first foray into the legal industry?
So I think eventually, like, my ultimate goal was to become a lawyer. But then I started out taking a legal assistant program here in BC. Got a job right away at the Department of Justice and loved it. And then I saw how many hours the lawyers worked. I thought, not sure if it's for me. But and then eventually got out into the private sector, did some family law, loved that, and then moved into getting trained to do paralegal type tasks in the private sector. And so at that point, I decided I thought it would be best for me to go back to school and get my certificate. So I did that. But it was the ultimate goal was to become a lawyer, but it turned out differently.
But somewhere along the way, you became a business owner.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Not sure how that happened.
How did you glide over into the discovery side of things?
So when I started out in working at the Department of Justice, back then there was no 1996, there was no, if there was, I didn't know about it, didn't know anything about it. But I think I started working in e-discovery, I think it would have been like around 2005, I think. And that was my second stint at the Department of Justice. And we were back then using Ringtail. And so in BC, there was a real small group of us that were using Ringtail. It was on a class action. It was tainted blood class action. And so our team was flown out to Toronto to do the training because the Toronto team was using Ringtail, but here in BC, no one was. So we did that I think it was about 2005. And then summation, which I think everyone's touched at some point or another. A couple of years later, we started using summation in the private sector. And then moved into Eclipse SE around 2015, I think, is when I started using SE, and then Rel 1 and now Reveal. So gone through quite a few pieces of software over the years.
Right. You've seen a few different platforms.
Yeah, exactly.
What we could spend time on that, but I know what you'd really like to talk about is access to justice. And so let's shift to that. How did you get involved in access to justice issues, and what led you there?
So as a paralegal, I've always thought that paralegals can, do a lot more than what we were traditionally doing. And there was so many things that we can help our clients with, but there were so many restrictions around that. So in BC, paralegals have to be supervised by a lawyer for the work that they do. And anything outside of that could be considered to be unauthorized practice. So, for me, I think in terms of when I started to think about access to justice and how it was important to me as a paralegal, there was a specific incident I think that stands out in my mind when I was working on the island in Victoria. And I went to the courthouse to file some documents. And I saw this woman at the counter, and she was visibly upset, and the registry staff was doing their best to help her, but at the end of the day, they were saying, we can't file your documents. They're not filled out right. you've got to go back and fill them out properly, go see a lawyer. And, I just stood there and I wanted to help her, but I knew that there likely could be, a line I was crossing. And so, I did end up helping her. I asked her to come back to my firm and got one of the lawyers there to help her. But, it was moments like that, that I saw clients struggling with things where I thought there's got to be, something out there that we can do as paralegals. And then, when I was working in the family law sector, there were clients that were, remortgaging their houses just to get access to their kids. So I've always thought that paralegals had the skills and the knowledge and the training and experience to help those people who couldn't afford lawyers, to just navigate their way through the system, especially in those areas where there's gaps in our legal system, or gaps in where there's no access, right? So, poverty law, the little things where there's lawyers aren't actually representing clients. And so over the years, I worked on lots of different committees, but I think that's when I decided to look into paralegal associations and what's out there. And that's when I joined the BC Paralegal Association. And then over the years, I started working on different associations and committees. But we had roadblocks along the ways, and, there was lots of challenges. I think now, from what I understand, I haven't been following it closely enough, but I think there's some long overdue momentum within the, just here in BC within the Law Society, and I think it's called the Innovation Sandbox. So there is some movement and some momentum, which is great now. And that's not to say that there aren't lots of lawyers and lots of paralegals and lots of associations that are doing some of this work, the pro bono work, but there's still this undeniable gap in our, and I think it's not just BC or Canada or North America, it's all across the world. There's this gap when it comes to access to justice across the board. So I just felt like there's something we should all be able to do, right? So I think anyone with some formal training, anyone with some formal legal training has an obligation to look at their own practices and see what they can do to kind of help bridge that gap. So I think that goes for legal assistants, paralegals, vendors like Triage. There's lots of lawyers and organizations that have these initiatives within their own companies, and they're doing what they can, including pro bono. There's lots of not-for-profit organizations doing some incredible work, but there's still lots we can do. And as a new business owner in the litigation support and the legal technology space, I feel like I'm in a position to do more than just talk about the challenges and barriers, and actually do something about it.
Where then so you've got a strong interest in access to justice. Mm-hmm. You've got an e-discovery firm.
Yeah.
How do the two line up?
That's actually a really, really good question, and something that I've been working on for the last 6 months, and really trying to figure out, what are the hurdles right now that we're facing, and is there a way that we can provide any support here at Triage? And I think there's so many groups out there that need the technology that we use here at Triage, but I would say kind of the most obvious barriers would be, you have to look at funding for legal aid clients, the cost of web hosting, then there's, web hosting and, cost of e-discovery software, the complexity of the software. So even just having the software is one thing, but then how do you use it? So the lack of trained staff to use the software. So those are some of the barriers, I think. Collaboration. I think there's lots of committees moving in the right direction, including groups that are not part of the conventional, access to justice community. But there's lots we can learn from different groups, especially, the people on the front line, like court registry staff, who are daily dealing with members of the public who are facing these challenges.
So let's tick off a few of those items. One of the challenges they face is that they don't. It's probably fair to say that they often lack the resources to gain access to the technology itself.
Yeah.
Right? How can that be addressed?
That's that's I think the $1,000,000 question. I think for me personally, I'm trying to reach out to some of those frontline people, to see what exactly is it that people want and need. And so looking at those wants and needs and seeing if there's something on our side with Triage and companies like Reveal who are willing to and wanting to, help with access to justice across the board, to see what we can do. So I think that the first thing is just seeing if there is any room for us to help in these areas. Reaching out to legal aid, reaching out to different groups. Here in Canada, we've got Pivot, we've got Access Pro Bono that we can reach out to, who are associations and not-for-profit organizations who are on the front lines working with these front-end users. So I think there's lots of ways we can try to broaden the participation in terms of trying to figure out what is that unmet need and how is it that companies like Triage and other vendors can help, with time, resources, that kind of thing. And like you said, figuring out what that want and need is from the public.
I wonder, I'm trying to think about how best to phrase this. One of the things that I have long encountered, and this is without respect to the subject area of litigation, the type of practice people are involved in, and I'm going to focus on litigation for this example. But I have, over the years, frequently been in a position to deal with or assist attorneys who haven't had enough experience with electronic discovery to appreciate just what it is they're not doing in the first place.
Right.
Is that potential lack of awareness especially acute in this arena, or do you think it's pretty much the same as general?
I think it's that's a good question. I think it's same as general, or I mean, I think it can be both. I think it depends on who is um who's who's the end user, right? Like who are they supporting? So if it's an associate who's working doing some pro bono work and has a file, all of a sudden it's got hundreds and thousands of records, and realizes, wait a minute, this is going to take a lot longer to do physically, like looking at these pieces of paper, then putting it into some software, and then that person then not having either access to the software or knowledge of how to use the software. So it could be, I think, both. And so I think those are some of the gaps that we need to look at in terms of, how do we, as a vendor, or companies like Reveal or other companies that are in this e-discovery space, how do we then provide some support, and how do we help these end users, whether it's a lawyer doing pro bono or a self-represented litigant, how do we help them navigate their way through this software? Is it just a cost thing? Do we reduce our costs and provide um, better costs, or is it cost plus training, or cost plus, hey, we'll support this particular case for you? So there's I don't know what the answer is yet. And I'm not sure I ever will have the right answer or the full answer. And I'm not saying this initiative or the work that we do at Triage is the only answer. There's so many barriers and so many ways to look at access to justice. But as a new business owner and someone who has worked in the legal industry for so long and has seen the struggles of people who can't afford lawyers, right? And wanting to try to figure out what those things are, what the wants, the needs are of the public, how e-discovery software can help with that, how vendors like us can help with that. And that's really just, I think, getting out there, talking to the lawyers who are doing this type of work, talking to the public, talking to registry staff who are dealing with people on a regular basis. I think those are some of the things that we we need to look at as a whole.
Have you seen approaches that are either especially effective when it comes to this, or the flip side, uh, not at all productive?
Um, I don't think that I could say that there's anything that's not productive. I think that anyone that's having a conversation, whether it's meetings and initiatives they're trying to put together, I think everything's productive. Just even having the conversation and bringing it up and having people aware that there are these issues within our legal system, I think that's always productive. I've seen lots of, over the years, lots of initiatives that are fantastic and they do work. There's lots of groups here in BC that are doing amazing things. But technology is, if you're looking at the front end user and you're looking at a self-represented litigant, technology is the biggest challenge, I think, because you've got people who, first of all, don't know how to navigate their way through the legal system, and now they've got technology that they're not really sure how to use. So I think there's some great initiatives. There's some great things going on within different organizations, but I think that we all have a duty to anyone that's working, in any kind of legal industry, legal support, lawyers, paralegals, legal assistants, companies like Triage, Reveal. I think all of us have an obligation to look at where we can help within these gaps that are currently existing.
You've got some initiatives in your own organization, right?
Yeah, so we've just, we're working through like right now trying to meet with some lawyers and some different groups who do work on front lines with access to justice. So we're working on that. We've also got Triage has just recently done a reconciliation plan. So working with Indigenous communities. And part of our, reconciliation plan is to restore, it's a process to restore the trust and to rebuild relationships. Oh, sorry, my computer seems to be talking to me. Relationships with Indigenous, yeah, exactly, just bing, bing. Relationships with Indigenous peoples and communities to try and make a positive impact. And our reconciliation plan, as it stands right now, we're trying to have some measurable tasks put into place. And so in the next few years, we, want to aim to increase the awareness of Indigenous cultures in our own company. And so that's in the form of education, with our teams about the histories and the rights of Indigenous peoples and communities. We want to build meaningful relationships to create trust and opportunities for positive impact. We currently work with a number of firms across Canada that work on the legal side, like legal law firms that work with Indigenous communities. And we also work directly with Indigenous communities. And we want to ensure that we can support their efforts by either providing, preferred pricing, to try to provide support with whether it's training or, we also do scanning and coding here. So a lot of Indigenous groups right now are looking at preserving their historical documents. So some of the things that we do for them is scanning some of those documents and ensuring that they have a platform that they can access. So helping them through that. So we're really closely working on that, and hopefully in the next few years we're going to just continue to grow our action plan to make sure that we're doing more and more.
As you work with the Indigenous communities in Canada, and you think again of your own organization as an electronic discovery provider, are there any challenges that are particularly acute?
Yeah, I would say cost is probably a big one. And I think that comes up for, Indigenous communities and access to justice clients. The cost is probably the biggest barrier. And so that's one of the things we want to look at. And, the preferred pricing, I think that if we can work on that and roll that out, I think that would be extremely helpful. So cost is always, because the e-discovery platforms are not, not
inexpensive, right?
not inexpensive, but But yeah, so just looking at different ways to assist with that, I think is, and Reveal's been great. They're really on board with working with us um, to try and find some ways that we can assist with that.
As you look to the future, what do you hope to be able to accomplish with these access to justice efforts?
Just to be able to give back to an industry that I've been in for 2.5 decades. To be able to, as a as a new business owner in this space, I want to be able to, make sure that, I was talking to a lawyer a couple of days ago who works in criminal law, and I remember her saying to me, it's such an uneven playing field because they've got, on one side, you've got an accused person who's on legal aid, who has very little funding. And then you've got, on the other hand, you've got, big government who's got endless resources and has access to all kinds of software. And, so I think it's just trying to even that playing field a little bit to make sure that everyone that needs to use, you know, an e-discovery platform can use it, and that they have the same level of access as big national firms across the street. I think that it's really just trying to even the playing field. It doesn't seem fair to me that one party has access to something and the other party doesn't, right? So I think that would be probably my biggest goal in all of this, is to make sure that um, everyone has the same level of access to the technology.
For people who might be interested in getting more involved with these issues, whether it's Canada or what do you suggest? Besides, so sounds like number one, call you.
No. I was kidding, George.
We'll put a phone number on the screen here. But for people who are looking to get more involved, what suggestions do you have for them?
I think that depending on where you are, there's lots of different organizations. There's lots of not-for-profit organizations. Here in BC, we have lots of them that are working directly with clients, volunteers. I think if you're working for a law firm, reach out to some of your partners, reach out to the people who are the decision makers, who can say, who you can have these conversations with. And this is likely not the first time they've had this conversation, because this is not a new issue. This is something that's going on for years. So I think talk to some of those decision makers and say that you're really interested to get involved. And here in BC, we've got the Law Society has, a designated paralegal initiative that's been going on for years. And so there's lots of room for paralegals and, it's just asking the questions, getting in front of the right people, and trying to get involved within the current volunteer organizations that are doing this work, and then start to kind of expand from there is probably my best advice.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, George.
Rose Singh is the CEO and owner. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Triage Data, with 2.5 decades of experience in this area, and obviously a strong interest in access to justice. So don't all necessarily call Rose. Do try to follow her lead. I am George Socha. This has been eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. Thank you all for joining us for this, our last episode of 2021, and we look forward to seeing you all again in 2022. Thank you, Rose.
Thanks, George. Nice to see you.
Likewise.